Okay. So despite the sort of empirical reality, the researchers in many of these papers make statements such as this: women should be advised not to use these substances during pregnancy, and that the exposed offspring may have long-term subtle deficits, even though the evidence doesn't support this sort of thing. Or I think, too, that we exaggerate drug effects because there are benefits to doing that. Humans don't engage in behavior repeatedly if there's no function or benefit. But we engage in this behavior repeatedly, I am suggesting, because there are specific benefits to a number of groups, including another reason that we exaggerate the effects of drugs. It allows us to target people that we don't like without explicitly saying so. Now, I'm going to give an example of this with race. I'm going to talk a little bit about racial discrimination and racism. It's so hard to talk about this racism and racial discrimination in our country at this moment, in part because we're so divided as a country. And people on the left, people on the right, the arguments are so low level, it just frustrates me. And so I'm trying my best not to be divisive. I'm trying my best just to point out the facts, and trying my best not to call people bad people because. I'm trying to figure this out, and I need your help. And if I am divisive, please let me know. But I'm trying not to do that sort of thing. I'm trying to actually make a contribution to our country because it's one of the few times that I'm really worried about where we're going as a group of Americans. I worry about my American brothers and sisters. So as I use the term racism, I must define it, and so we all are on the same page. It's a simple definition. I just simply mean an action that results in a disproportionate, unjust, or unfair treatment of persons from a specific racial group. That's all I mean. I'm not talking about intent. I don't know what's in the person's head, nor do I care. It's not because if the action, this sort of disproportionate negative impact has happened to a group, it's felt and it's real, even though the persons may not have meant for that to happen. It doesn't make that person a bad person who has participated in it, but it does mean that it's still real. And so I'm going to give you just a quick drug example, and then because this is abstract at the moment, I'll give you a quick drug example, and then hopefully that makes it clear what I'm talking about. This is a picture. This slide just shows crack cocaine and powder cocaine. If you focus your attention to the left, that's powder cocaine. If you focus your attention to the right, that's crack cocaine. The only difference between the two is on the left, where you see the circle. The powder cocaine contains this thing called the hydrochloride salt. In order to smoke cocaine, you have to get rid of that hydrochloride salt. Some industrious people figured out that you can get rid of that hydrochloride salt simply by mixing your powder cocaine in water and baking soda, heating it up, and then when it dries out, it comes back without the salt, and that's crack. That's just a cocaine-free base. It's the only difference between the two forms of cocaine. They produce identical pharmacological, biological effects. It's true when you store cocaine, the effects are delayed relative to smoking crack cocaine. Smoking crack cocaine produces more rapid onset of effects. That's true, but that's related to route of administration, because when you dissolve powder cocaine in water and shoot it intravenously, it produces the identical sort of onset of effects as smoking crack cocaine. So they are the same drug. We're all on the same page. They're the same drug. Just want to make sure we're on the same page. But yet, in 1986, one of the things we did in the United States is that we passed this law that punished crack cocaine violations 100 times more harshly than powder cocaine violations. We passed that law in 1986, and then we extended that law in 1988 to, the law was first passed only for traffickers in 1988. It was extended to people who were simply possessing crack cocaine, and also it was extended to people who were first-time offenders. That was the first time in our history that we had done such a thing. And also, the 1988 law included some language that I find funny, so I don't cry. But the language said that by 1995, now this is in 1988 when the law passed, it said by 1995, the United States would be drug-free. And institutions that receive public funds would have to have in place policies to ensure that this happens. And we got the drug-free workplaces and those sorts of things. Now, I just find this remarkable that smart, intelligent people passed a law that indicated that we would be drug-free. No people on the history of the planet has ever been drug-free. You don't want to live in a place that's drug-free. Anyway, I got it. I'm sorry, I was trying to talk about racial discrimination. I'm sorry. When we think about this law, the law itself is not racist. I know people say that the law is racist. It's not. It's the enforcement of the law that we're concerned about. These are the people who've been convicted under the law. 80% of the people who've been convicted under the law are black. Even though black people don't use cocaine, don't represent the majority of the crack cocaine users. But they represent 80% of those people arrested for the law. Since we're in Southern California, and I'll just give you a California example, to show how bad this was, there was a study done by the U.S. Sentencing Commission in 1992 of LA County. Of nearly 1,000 people arrested for crack in LA County, not one white person was prosecuted under this law. That's from the U.S. Sentencing Commission. But that just goes to show how the enforcement of the law was done in a racially discriminatory manner. The law itself is neutral, but it's how we are enforcing the law. Anyway, Barack Obama came along and said he was going to get rid of the law. He didn't. The law was modified to such that we no longer punish crack violations 100 times more harshly. We now punish them 18 times more harshly. As Malcolm X has said, Malcolm X beautifully spoke to this issue. He didn't realize, but he beautifully spoke to this issue when he said that if you stab me in the back with a 9-inch knife and then you pull it out 6 inches, that's not justice. And that's kind of what we're having here. Moving on. That's an example of racial discrimination. It's not to say that the cops or the police who are going out to enforce that law are racist. That's not what I'm saying. That in order to call them racist, there's another step that's required. It just simply means, there are people who were just doing their job, doing what they were told to do. So I want to be clear about how I use these terms. Now, with the current opioid crisis, it gives us another opportunity to exert our sort of racism in drug law enforcement. Now, let me just, the governor of Maine can say it better than me because he says what we do with our drug policy and what we've been doing with our drug policy in this country but nobody has been stupid enough to articulate it. But here's one. Here, check this out.
He was talking about out-of-state drug dealers coming into Maine in response to a question. It's a topic he discusses at a lot of town hall forums. Here's what he said last night.
The traffickers, these are people that take drugs. These are guys that are named D-Money, Smoothie, Shifty, these type of guys that come from Connecticut, New York. They come up here, they sell their heroin, then they go back home. Incidentally, half the time they impregnate a young white girl before they leave, which is a real sad thing. For men, we have another issue that we've got to deal with down the road.
We have to take away their children. That's our other. But Governor LePage nicely described what we were doing. He separated skillfully. He wasn't talking about the users of opioids. He's talking about the traffickers of opioids. Now, one of the things that we know is that most of the opioid users in the country are white. And this is, again, not to divide us. This is just fact. This is just fact. And we also know that most people buy drugs from people of their own race. But when it comes to opioid prosecution or arrest at the federal level, 80% of the people being arrested for opioid trafficking in this country today at the federal level are Black and Latino. 80%. So we can see how these things continue, this pattern continues.